Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. Tell us your name and what you do.
My name is Kim Patton, and I do a lot of things. I'm a foster mom, I'm an adoptive mom, I'm a writer, podcast host, comedian. Just kidding, I'm not a comedian. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
What do you not do? I think that list will be shorter.
I don't do comedy. I think if I got on stage, people would laugh me off the stage.
That's comedy. That's like
I don't know
that's
how long
comedy.
I would last. I would probably start dancing and be like, is this
That's
funny?
comedy.
And they'd be like, no, you can go. Just walk off the stage. Okay. All right. See ya.
That's comedy. I mean, you do something. I don't know if you've noticed there are different kinds of comedy that, some people just do some crazy stupid things to themselves and people just laugh. There's no punchline.
Yes. Yes. And that would not be me. I think if I did comedy, because I'm a writer, I would probably work with someone to help me just tell stories that actually have a point, because I do tell a lot of stories and I have funny stories to tell, but they don't always have a point. I would need someone to help me craft them so that they made sense logically and then had like a punchline that was actually something people would think was funny. Because I think when I tell a story, sometimes they just kind of look at me like, oh, cool story. Then you found $20? Yeah, that's what happened. I'm a lot better now than I used to be. I used to just talk my way through life. Yes, but now I know that people will not find that funny, and so I refrain from telling all the stories like I used to.
Yeah, even the great comedians, they test their joke. So yeah, so it's not like sometimes we put so much responsibility on ourselves as beginners that we forget that the big guys, right, the big dogs, they do they test their comedy. They have a small crowd, so they're like, oh yeah, and then sometimes they realize, oh, that's not so funny. I thought it was, but and then they go to the big stage and then they perform the comedy and they're like, wow, this guy's so good. And I'm like, he's told that joke a couple of times.
Yeah, it takes time and it takes practice, and we are so prideful. We think that once we start something, we're just automatically going to be good at it and that we should be good at it. No. Have you ever picked up a violin and just played a beautiful song? I mean, the violin is extremely difficult to play, and they spend years and years of pain and suffering to be able to play the violin beautifully.
Yeah.
Same thing with piano. I mean, if you've ever seen like a little second grader plunking around on the piano, I practiced those songs over and over and over again, and they would be terrible at the beginning. And then by the end, my fingers knew what to do and it flowed, and I could, have dynamics, loud and soft, and put a little bit more emotion into it. But that first couple days of practice, ugh.
I think the problem is not the practice itself. It's the problem is the expectations we have of the practice. And I'll say this in terms of podcasting. Now, when we start the first couple of episodes, we're like, oh yeah, it's terrible. That's because we with podcasting is different, right? It's like if you're playing a piano, practicing your mom's basement, and nobody gets to hear your stuff. So you're like, I'm not really good. When I'm good, I play at the Carnegie Hall and all that. But with a podcast, you're terrible. You know that. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm judging myself. You suck. And this is objective, right? But you show up, and in order to get better, you have to practice and show up in the world. So it's not like, oh, I practice playing piano in my mom's basement, and then when I get better, I would play in the Carnegie Hall. It's more like I'll drop the podcast episode, and then eventually you keep doing it, and then you get better. And so that's where it's a bit confusing. It's like writing a book, right? If you write a book, you might write first 10, maybe 10 drafts, and then the final draft, like, oh yeah, this sounds like something good, and you put it out there to the world. But with a podcast, the first episode is like your first draft. You're like, hello people, you're just all over the place. And the 20th episode, you're like, oh yeah, I think I feel like I know what I'm doing, right?
And hopefully you gain listeners as you go, and they don't care as much. I've learned like the quality of a book or the quality of even a song or a piece of art or a podcast episode, they I'm not saying they're not smart. It's just they enjoy what they enjoy. And so if they hear your voice and they're like, oh, this podcast is interesting, they
Yeah.
don't automatically think about all the things you're doing wrong because they're not podcasting. So they don't know. But as you get better, they have already grown attached to you. And yeah, maybe if they looked back, they could compare it. But from the beginning, they're like, yeah, I've been listening to this person for a year now. And he's just a voice in my home. He's just a voice on my commute. It's just a regular
What
part
would
of my
Kim say?
life. Yeah. I mean, my podcast episodes now are a lot better than they used to be. But um, honestly, I actually started out pretty strong because somebody helped me get to the title, get to the subtitle, get to the intro. And so I was very confident from the very beginning because I put in a lot of work ahead of time before I launched. And I got some wisdom. There was some wisdom. Ha ha. And I relied on other people to help me get the podcast started because my ideas in getting the podcast started were not going anywhere. And
So
someone
in
really
short,
sat me down and they just
you
said, "Hey, this is the direction that you need to go because where you are right now is so scattered. You need to focus in on this one thing." And that's what I did.
what's the name of your podcast? Tell me about your podcast.
I host the Book Therapy podcast. It's encouraging foster and adoptive moms, foster and adoptive families, one book at a time. So I take one book and I take all the good stuff out of it and
You're
talk about
genius.
the
Do you know
cliff
that?
notes. So
You
they
know
don't have
that,
to read the
right?
whole book. I mean, no, I'm definitely not a genius, but I'm not a comedian and I'm
That's
not a
exactly
genius.
what geniuses say. Like that's the exact script. It's like people have a convention. Like, oh yeah, when people say you're a genius, tell them this. Oh, we don't want them to know that we're genius. We don't want them, the CIA and the CIA hunting us down. Like, yeah, you have to work for the government. Oh, I really love that. Like, it's clear what it's not like. It's like the show is everywhere. It's like this is it. I know what to get from the show, and I know if it's for me or not. Right? It's like most of the times people. I feel like most people's podcasts. It's like you know how you have a meal that you don't know what to call the meal because the meal has everything in it. There's bread in it. There's sauce in it. There's rice in it. There's everything, and you're like, what exactly is this? And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's an experiment. Like, are you sure this is not going to lead me to the world beyond? I was like, no, no, no. Like, let's stick with rice. Like, I know that. Like, let's just stick with rice, right? And yours is it's a different format and it's a clear listener base, adoptive parents and foster parents. Why book? Why a book? Why not just do interviews? And
Um, I do really enjoy interviews. I know that when I started the podcast, I didn't want to just do interviews and have it just be an interview style podcast with no focus because all I knew were Christian women interviewing people for their podcast and they would talk about whatever they wanted to. And it
yeah,
was interesting, very interesting. And I listened to those a lot. But I listened to a podcast called What Should I Read Next by Anne Bogle. And she would bring on someone to the show and ask them what their 3 favorite books are, and then one book that they don't like. And then she would give them tips on what to read next. So that podcast was really interesting to me because it provided so many book titles and I just soaked it up because not only was she talking about books, but they were talking about it in a way that made me want to read them. So, I knew I wanted to do something with books and I had been doing like book reviews on YouTube.
well,
And I just found myself just loving talking about books. I just wanted to talk about books all the time. So then I started a literary society, and I just got a bunch of people together. And every couple of weeks, we would get together at someone's house or at a bookstore, and we would go around the circle and talk about what we were reading. And it was beautiful because it wasn't like a book club where you just talk about one book and you all read the same book. Everyone got to read whatever they wanted to read. And then we all went around the circle and shared the highlights or the lowlights of the books we were loving and the books we were hating. So that I would leave the literary society and I would be like, I just want to talk more about my books that I've been reading. So it's kind of like a selfish endeavor. I just gave myself a microphone and gave myself permission to talk about books.
Oh, why foster parents? Why adoptive parents? Why not just talk about books?
I did for the first 3 seasons. I started a couple years ago, and for the first 3 seasons, I just talked about whatever books I wanted to talk about. It was just called Book Therapy with Kim Patton. There was no subtitle. And
Yeah.
then last year, I felt kind of just a nudge because we had started foster parenting and we had adopted our daughters in 2020 and 2021. So I'm an adoptive mom, and then we started doing foster care, and I became a foster mom overnight, and I was like, wow, we need help. Foster and adoptive families need help. We need encouragement. We need someone to read those books because we don't have time. And I was willing to read the books. And so I thought, you know what? I feel like God is kind of encouraging me to focus on foster and adoptive families and foster and adoptive tools and books that would encourage parents. And the thing is, though, not every book has to be specifically about foster and adoptive parenting because that can get like too serious too fast. So I try not to pigeonhole every single book. But what I do is I look at the book and I say, okay, what can I pull out of this that will encourage a foster and adoptive parent? So one book I talked about with my brother is The Gap and the Gain. And it's just about measuring your success backward instead of forward. So instead of setting a goal of, I'm going to do this next year, and that's how I'm going to measure my success is if I achieve this goal, you look back at the last 2 years and you say, okay, how am I doing in this area? How is our marriage? How is my relationship with my kids? How am I doing at work? And you measure your success as to, okay, oh, I'm doing a lot better getting up in the morning, or I'm doing a lot better exercising
Yeah.
once or twice a week. You know, you don't have to look forward and kill yourself about all the things you're not achieving. You look back and go ahead and celebrate the things that you are doing well. And I talked about that with my brother, and we just related it to foster and adoptive parenting in our conversation. And so that way I can kind of cover whatever book that I want as long as I look through it with the lens of encouraging families. And I use specific language that I know they will feel seen and heard.
At a point in time, I was like, why am I putting my hand on my jaw and just listening? And I was like, oh, yeah, now I know. Our podcast is called Book Therapy. There's a lot of talk. I was like, oh, yeah, tell me, how did you get started? I was like, well, what was your childhood like? How did your childhood affect you? No, no, I'm not going to ask you those questions. But at a point, I was like, wait, are you sure we're not having a therapy session? I was like, yeah, not for me,
I
though.
mean, when's the last time you read a book and it felt like therapy? You felt like someone was coming alongside you, reading your thoughts, reading your mail, reading your journals, and saying, this is what you need right now. And I'm going to just tell you my journey, and I'm going to
Yeah.
help you walk through your journey so that you feel less alone. And when I have a problem, I don't know what other people do. Now that we have ChatGPT, I'm sure most of us just ask him what the answer to our
Him?
problems are. I mean, it might. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I call him Chad, so he's a male to me
It's a
because,
grab, six-pack. Dude,
well,
I'm
he's a
just
part of our
kidding.
family. It's
Yeah.
Chad, you know, like it's not even Chad GPT. It's Chad.
It's
Like
Chad. It's like Chad.
he's real.
Well,
I go to books to help solve my problems, and so to me, reading is therapy. I have 2 kids, I'm married, I'm a foster mom, I have a relationship with God, I have a relationship with my brothers and my friends. And the minute that I'm really struggling in any of those areas,
yeah.
I go to my library online and I type in keywords and I get about 10 books, and then I rifle through them and I pick which ones I want to read. And if I'm feeling like I want to read fiction because too much is in my head and I just need to enjoy a story and follow someone else's problems for a little while, then I want a good ending, then I'll pick up a fiction book. But for the most part, I read nonfiction. And I absolutely love reading other people's memoirs because the more they tell me about their worst days, the more I feel less alone in my pain and my
Yeah.
worst days. And I read a lot of spiritual books that help me in my faith journey because faith is hard. I mean, God is invisible. We have a relationship with an invisible God. I mean, that's hard. That's a hard journey. No matter how long you've been on a faith journey, it always takes just a leap of faith to even trust that things are going to be okay. And even if things are not okay, that, we are where we need to be. So, a lot of times, if I'm scared, if I'm lonely, if I'm angry, if I'm confused, if I want an answer to the question of why my daughter is doing this crazy, ridiculous thing for the 100th time and I can't figure out why she's doing it or what she could possibly be thinking, or I just want some tips. I just want a little bit of like a nudge in the right direction. Do I do what they say? No. Half the time I don't even do what they say. But I still like to read about it. I just want to know what my
Uh,
options are. People can give me 50 options. I may choose one.
uh, well, so in that sense, in summary, you made a podcast for people like you.
I made a podcast for me so that I could talk about books and
Yeah.
get away with it.
Do you do interviews right now, not in the past, like currently?
Yes, I do a lot of interviews. What I've come to find out is there's so many good books and there's so many good authors. And when I read a book, I contact the author if I want them on my
Okay.
show. And I don't even care how famous they are. I will reach out to them shamelessly and be like, hey, come on my podcast. And also, I've gotten recommendations of books from other people. I'm on email lists where people send me books for free so that I can have them on the podcast. So, I I've I found that I love talking to people. It's so fun. I mean, it's so fun. It just brings a lot of life to me. It brings me a lot of energy and joy and just connecting with people. I've been trying to get off social media for the last few years. And one of the reasons I started the podcast is because I wanted to have relationships with people without depending on social media.
Yeah.
And I find that when I spend an hour with them, I remember them, I know them forever. And I think that's much more powerful than following them online. You don't really get to talk to them. But
Yeah.
now that I've met you, I mean, I'll remember Wisdom from Nigeria forever because we spent time together. And I think that's way better than social media. So the podcast to me has filled that gap of just meeting really awesome people and getting to have great conversations, whether it's about a book or whether I'm on their podcast. It's just really fun. It's like addicting.
Uh, when we started the conversation, you mentioned that you had someone work on your podcast to help, give you a sense of, okay, this is the title, this is the subtitle. I'm curious, was it paid, or was it more like a friend helping out a friend?
Um, I beg people for help on a regular basis.
No shame in that.
Yeah, if they see my name coming across their phone, they're like, "Oh, glory, what does this girl want? And what book is she trying to sell me?" Because I'm always, writing a book, and I'm like, "Hey, I wrote a new book." Um, so her name is Karen, and she is kind of like a writing mentor to me. We became friends in 2019, 2020, and I read her books, and I reached out to her, and I was just yeah, I was going through something in my personal life that she had talked about on a podcast. And so I reached out to her personally, and she was so warm, inviting, passionate, caring, and she just met me exactly where I was and was a friend immediately. And she didn't have to do that. So I just ran with it, and and she kind of became someone I turned to help me with my writing because she was a writer, and she wrote a book about writing. And so after I read it, I reached out to her again and just asked her questions about writing. So when my podcast was kind of rolling around in my brain, I was like, I don't know what I want it to be. I just want to, yeah, like you said, you have these ingredients and it's like, what is this? And why in the world would people listen to it? This makes no sense. So I wasn't getting anywhere. I made some graphics and I was going to name it. Oh gosh, what was I going to name it? Oh, it was a good name, but I'm so glad I didn't name it that. Because it just had no direction.
If
And
it was a good
she
name, why are you glad you didn't name it that? Are you sure it's a good
forgot
name?
it. Well, why did I forget it then? It was like, I kept telling my husband, like, yeah, I think this is it. Like, this is a good name. And he's like, I mean, maybe, sure. I don't know. It was called like Just One. I cannot even remember it. That's hilarious. I need to look that up.
Okay.
But it was like One Step Forward or Just One Step, or I don't know, something.
Step forward.
Oh, it's called Lean In. Lean In.
Lean. Wow.
Lean in. You know how people
Wow.
say that? Like, we just really want to
Leaning.
lean in. We just want
What
to
are we
lean into
leaning
the
in for?
conversation. Yeah, we're leaning in. So that's what it was. It was going to be Lean In with Kim Patton. But
Leaning.
what was the point? I don't know. I didn't have a point. So Karen emailed me back and forth, and we emailed back and forth, and she kind of was like, you need a little bit more clarity. So if you're going to focus on books, maybe you need to give your listeners an idea of what they're getting into instead of just leaning.
Yeah, leaning. That's like a name any podcast can take and grab on, and there won't be a problem. Leaning. Everybody's leaning for a conversation. But I'm like,
Yeah.
what exactly am I leaning for? Is it for
I
gossip? Is it for a kiss? What am I leaning for? Like leaning for what exactly?
yeah.
Leaning.
It is a good title because, okay, it's not a good title for my podcast
How do
because
I explain this
it's
now? It's a
nothing.
good name. It's a good concept, but it doesn't really do the job. It's like book therapy now. I know when I hear that name, I know what I'm getting. I'm like book and then therapy, book therapy. It's clear. But leaning, now you have to explain what the podcast is because I don't know if it's for me or not. I'm like, oh, leaning sounds like a good name. What's it about? I mean, the podcast name like the rest is history, the rest is politics, the rest is science. Those podcast names, when I see the rest is science, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a science geek. I'd love to listen to this podcast. The rest is politics. Not my cup of tea. I'm not interested. I mean, people should be able to say yes or no instantly without wondering. I'm not sure when they'll hear your podcast name. And if your podcast passed that test, it's a great name.
Do you think the subtitle? Okay, so when you look at a podcast, there's like 3 parts to it in my brain, like the cover, like the name of the podcast, the name of the person, and then a subtitle. Because people like the name, they like
Yeah.
knowing who's in charge. They often like a face to go with that name, but you also have to have a short title and then somewhat of a subtitle to kind of explain, because nothing can be summed up in 2 words. I mean, as good as book therapy is, it doesn't talk anything about what I'm doing with the books or what
Okay. I mean, probably we'll have to work on that, but yeah.
so
Okay,
the
like the
subtitle gives more clarity.
quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind the scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode. The name of my podcast is called My Podcast Story. When you hear that, when you hear that, what do you think about?
Yes, are you just wanting me to tell you that you have a great name of your podcast? Because yes, you do.
Okay.
You do
Let me use
wisdom.
let me use a different example. If you hear a podcast name like "How to Take Over the World," what do you think? What do you think the podcast is about?
Hunter gatherers who grow
How to
their
how to
own.
take over the world. How to take over the world.
They weapons. I don't.
Okay, it's it's about political figures all over the world, how they ruled and conquered the world. So it's how to take over the world, right? And then there's a podcast called
Okay.
Founders Podcast. And what does the podcast do? He reads books, but the biographies of founders, right? Actual business entrepreneur founders. And then he goes 2 hours, 3 hours, and he's just talking about the book and that kind of stuff, right? So we want people to be able to tell if it's for them or not for them, right? Easily, so that I have expectations. And because what happens is when what leads to disappointment most of the time, it's not that something is wrong or bad. It's just that expectation is not managed. I mean, if you had the expectation that if you talk to me, you're going to become a millionaire, or I'm probably going to offer you a job. If you had that expectation, and after we have this conversation, even though we had a great conversation, you're going to feel disappointed and like, "Oh, yeah, that was terrible," because you had an expectation that was just different. But if the conversation was, I'm just going to talk to you and we're going to have a lovely conversation and see how it goes, right? And after the end of the conversation, you're like, oh, yeah, because the expectations was managed. So I feel like with the podcast, we want to manage expectations. What's in it for me?
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm glad you said what's in it for me because for so many years as a writer, I didn't think about what the reader was expecting. And I
Hmm.
didn't know how to translate my giftings as a storyteller and as a scene, I set up the scene, I talk about the relationships, whoever, is whatever's going
Yeah.
on in the mind of the main character, which is usually me because I write memoir. So I wanted to write my stories. I wanted to describe a scene and people would tell me, "Yeah, you do describe a scene well, but what is the point of that chapter? What is the point of that story? What is the theme of the whole book? What are you trying to convey?" And I've been writing online for 11 years, but I've been writing my whole life. So in the past 11 years, I think it has taken me hours and hours and hours and hours of, like you said, trying things out and just doing it
Yeah.
and then figuring out, okay, what is the reader expecting? And I don't know why it's so hard for me to put myself in the mind of the reader because I am a reader and I consume books. So I should know what they want. But when I'm telling my stories and when I'm, breaking everything down and going through the chapters and trying to extract themes and do story loops where I start the conversation and then I kind of drift away from it and then I bring it back to the conversation and give them that satisfying ending. I don't know how to do that. I'm just trying to tell a story that's like straightforward. Like I'm just saying what happened. Do they care what happened? No, they do not care what happened. They care about what they care about. What is in it for me? And
Hmm.
everybody is like that.
I
No
like that.
matter how much of a good person they are, how selfless they are, how nice they are to your face,
Isn't
they
that what
don't
drives
care about
society? What's in it for me?
what's in it
That
for
question,
me.
like, what's in it for me? Like, if you understand that question, you like people say, "Oh, he's a people person," because you understand that people like, "What's in it for me?" It's subconscious, right? And you talked about writing a book and all that. I realized, right? At first, I was like, "Who really cares?" But then I realized that it will show up. Every work of art gives something. The question is, are you intentional about what that work of art would give, right? So if
Mm.
you have a podcast, it's going to portray something. It's going to make people feel a certain way. Well, I think I would want to be intentional about what it would make people feel and the good and the kind of transformation it will bring to people's life. And one thing I've noticed, because I've started a series of podcasts, is that if you spend enough time with the concept of your show, it makes each episode super easy to do. It makes ideas super easy to do. Like my podcast is called My Podcast Today, and I know it needs much
It's a
more work,
great title. No, no, no. It's a great title. So perfect. So spot on.
but
I mean, just everything.
But it's easy for me. All I need to do is look for podcast hosts and interview them. Like I don't
Yeah.
even have to like wonder, okay, so what do I do today? I was like, oh, who do I interview? I'm like, oh yeah, I saw this lady. She has this great podcast. Send her a message. I love to talk to you, and it's so easy now. It's easier to get guests on your podcast, and also to like provide valuable content to the listener if you understand, if you have a great concept. Because now, if I'm pitching to you and I'm like, oh yeah, I'd love to have you on my podcast. It's called My Podcast Story, and you're like, oh wow, oh, so this show is for me. So I have something to contribute. I do have a podcast, right? But then if I pitch you and I'm like, That's what's
How
I'm
to
trying to
take
think
over
of
the
something that
world.
has nothing to do with
Don't
you.
how to take over the world. I don't know how to do that.
I was like, I'm not sure I'm the right guest for you. I don't think so because nobody wants to come on the show and end up stuttering. And I ask you a question, I'm like, I don't like. There's really nothing to contribute to. It's like I don't really think I'm the right person for you. I studied. What did I study? I studied. I studied. No, I'm trying to think of something that has nothing to do with how to take over the world. I studied office technology, right? So I basically studied to be a secretary. I don't think that has anything to do with taking over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Don't
it makes it because I've
invite
had
me.
these sentences where guests come on my show and like, well, I love your show. And I'm like, are you sure you're not just saying that to be nice? But, I have it so often. I'm like, I don't think everybody can just be lying because the show it's easy. Like people know what to expect, what to deliver, and even the listeners may know what to expect. And having concepts, ideas, it makes it easy to just show up. Because the problem is that most of the times, I don't know if you've noticed it, like, oh, what do I talk about now? Like, if you have a great show concept, you don't even have to worry about what you talk
Mm-mm.
about. Like the guy that has Founders Podcast, where he reads biographies of business entrepreneurs. There's so many different entrepreneurs of different ages. Like I mean, there's so many episodes. He doesn't even. I was like, today let's talk about Walt Disney. Tomorrow let's talk about Steve Jobs. You know, uh, and on and on and on and on. So it's easy and it's sweet. It's
Yeah.
fun.
There you've said so many good things, and I want to go back to your the art. You said something about when you make a piece of art or when you write a book or you have a podcast, you hope that you are intentional about what people walk away with because they're going to walk away with something. And I've never heard that before, and it makes sense. I struggle with figuring out what I need to be intentional with. I I don't articulate it well when I'm crafting my chapters, when I'm crafting my book. That's where an editor comes in and really helps me. And they
Yeah.
say, if you're writing this for foster and adoptive families, I think they need more practical tips. You're telling a great
Okay.
story, but I think you need to, at the end, have some reflection questions that make them think about, like, well, how does this affect their personal life and their families and the
Yeah.
foster kids in their home? And I'm thinking, okay, I'll do that right now. I promise. Like I will make the questions. I will do whatever it takes to help my reader. But that doesn't come natural to me. What comes natural is the scene setting and the emotional descriptions and the progression of the story, and people just they love that, and I know they love that, but it's still my job, it's still my responsibility to, like you said, be intentional with what they walk away with, because the last thing I want to do is let them down.
I think the problem is in the adult world, it's just a bit difficult. A different way to see it is if I asked you to write a book, and that's within your superpower. So you're like, oh yeah, that's okay. But now that I'm like, okay, what I want you to do, I want you to write a book for kids within the age of 5 to 9. Now, I have expectations from you. Now, it's not like I want you to change your message or anything, but I would expect more color, simpler language. I don't want you to talk about how the technological advancements. I don't want to see that. It's not like I hate your message, but I mean, we're writing for 5 to 9 year olds, so it's the same message, probably writing a memoir of how you grew up, but it's the same message, but it will change. Why? Because I think it will be selfish and a bit wicked for you to write a book, an academic book for kids in 5 to 9 years old. Like, there are expectations I have. I expect more color. I expect shorter sentences. I expect smaller words that we can pronounce without the child biting their tongue. Right? And so it's like constraining the audience and saying, who are they, right? If you're writing a journal paper for fellow academics, it's different, right? Right?
Yeah,
It's common. You see some writers, they like professionals. They do these journal papers, they publish it, and then they go on and they write a book. An example of such a person is Jonah Begg. I don't know if you know him, but it's common. He's a psychologist, and he talks about how white things go viral. And so he published all these journals, all this research, and then he went on and he wrote a book for the mainstream guys like us. And he brought a lot of stories and all this and all that. And I'm like, if the journal paper is actually quite different, right? So the same message, the same concept, but you see now because of the audience, he has changed it a bit. Does that make sense?
it makes me think about So one day I would love to teach writing
Oh, oh,
to
wow.
other people. I mean,
I,
I need to write a few more books to learn how to write better before I teach it.
I mean,
But by the time I teach it, maybe in like 20 years, I'll just, teach a creative writing
ooh,
class and it'll be
that's a
super
lot.
fun.
I mean, you
I'm,
could teach us how to get started.
yeah, I could. Well, here's the thing. I'm going to put this in my curriculum.
Okay.
I just imagine me standing in front of the class. Hello, class. Today we're going to learn how to write. I want you, and on the board, because I love to use the dry erase board. That's my favorite thing about
Okay.
teaching. I will write, okay, I want you to tell a story of your recent experience at the dentist.
Okay.
And then my first column, I'm going to say for 2 to 5-year-olds. And then my second column, I'm going to say for 15 to 19-year-olds. And then my third column, I'll say for 30 to 35-year-old women. And then my last column will be like 70 to 75-year-old men. Just as an example of you can have one story, but you have to think of who you're writing it to. And so you tailor that story to the audience, to the reader. Because honestly, that would be a good exercise for me. It would be a good practice to take the message that I'm trying to say and who's my audience, because it's all about the audience, whether it's our podcast or a book or we're teaching something. I mean, and even when you're reading the Bible, it's like, who was the intended audience? Who was the
Yeah.
person talking to? And that's the message that you pull out of that passage. It's not, what are they saying to me, a woman in 2026? No, they didn't know me. No.
I mean, I won't be surprised that one day I'm reading the Bible and like, and the Lord said to Kim Patton, I was like, yeah, I know her. I know her. I know this lady. What did the Lord say to her?
I would love to know. I would love to know what he probably would say, why have I created this creature? She vexes me. She vexes my spirit. Thus saith the Lord.
Wow, this is such a lovely concept and an idea. One of the things I've been understanding from a podcast is it's not even because most of the times we start a podcast not knowing what we want to talk about, and then we start talking and we just start saying "La, la, 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 la," and hopefully we'll find our voice. And that takes some time, right? And that's the goal, right? So eventually we do accomplish that. But I think most of the time we don't even know who we are. And so it's hard to even make a podcast for ourselves. Right. So we're not even talking about make a podcast for the world or make a podcast that people will love. I'm like, make a podcast that we want to listen to. And we're not even there because we don't even know who we are or what we want. And so it's hard, right? And so sometimes you have to like start and do a couple of episodes to eventually begin to see the pattern. So yeah, I like to talk to women entrepreneurs. I mean, it's not like having anything wrong. I hate anything about men entrepreneurs, but I just love to talk about women entrepreneurs, specifically moms, specifically not just moms, but and then you're like, oh yeah, I love this conversation. I think I should start a podcast where I talk to mom entrepreneurs in the US that have adoptive kids, something like that. I'm just freestyling right now. Disregard that idea, discard it. But you realize that, and okay, that's it. But then if you don't start, if you don't have those conversations, you might never figure it out. And so that's why sometimes you're like, oh yeah, you have to have a great concept. Great. But if you don't, there's no harm in, writing and having a conversation and eventually so yeah. The top 5 conversations I had last year was this and this and this. I think I find a pattern here. They're all women. They're all moms.
Yeah.
Like what's going on? This cannot just be coincidence. They're all entrepreneurs or they're all writers. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen
It
a pattern
shows
here.
up. It
Yeah.
stares at you in your face like, this is what you are good at. This is the path. Walk in this path.
Yeah.
I was thinking something as you were talking about just the way that we choose our topics and stuff. And you talked about that founders. I don't know if it's the founders one
Founders podcast. Founders
where the
podcast.
he reads the biographies.
Yeah, yeah.
So that just makes me want to make another podcast and talk
Okay, what are you
about
thinking?
well, he reads the biographies of founders and then talks about the book. So in my mind, I'm like the reading fairy. I
Okay.
read the book and
Okay.
I do all the work of extracting the best from the
Okay.
book, in my
Okay.
opinion. It's subjective, but and then I present it in a entertaining way. It's not
Yeah.
boring. I'm not. I mean, I don't think I'm boring. I think I'm a little annoying, but I'm not boring. So
Uh,
if I present it in a way that's, like, entertaining and it's only 20 minutes, I mean, that really is the concept of book therapy, but I love talking about books so much that, like, I've read probably hundreds of memoir,
okay. Okay.
and, um, I'd love to have, like, a memoir podcast where
Okay.
I just hit the best memoirs just over and over, and
That's general too. That's very generic.
it
I mean,
okay, and you're
what kind
right,
of memoirs are we talking
because
about?
well, okay, you're right.
I'm just
So
gonna say some things out loud. Probably maybe they might help you, in terms of the ideas. I've explored that concept, and I think I was like, okay, they had to take over the world. I think that guy focuses on biographies of politicians, right? So political figures, founders is like business entrepreneurs, and I'm like, okay, I could also do fashion, right? Something like biographies of people in the fashion world in a different capacity, right? But fashion is not my thing. But I was like different concepts of spinning up the idea, right? And like fashion is not my thing. So like, but whoever is listening and loves fashion, you can steal the idea. I give you permission. And I was like, okay, there's fashion, and then there is let's say I was like, I'm thinking. I mean, you could do female entrepreneurs. Now, I'm not saying you do it. I'm just putting the idea out there. But for memoirs like very general. Are we going to be looking at memoirs of moms, adopt foster moms? Like, what's the pattern in the memoirs you read?
okay. Wild by Cheryl Strayed. She hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls is just a famous memoir of her growing up with her family and her dad who was probably mentally okay.
So I think so from what you said so far, what I got, I think most of them are like memoirs of women.
Yeah, probably. I think okay, so when you're at the bookstore, they don't really have a
Okay,
section for memoir. They have a
okay,
section for nonfiction
okay,
and like self-help, but
okay,
and biographies. But there's not a
okay.
section for memoir. However, if you go to the biography section,
Yeah.
there's a famous tennis player, Andre Agassi, who was big in the 90s, and he wrote a memoir called Open. And it's in probably it's an autobiography, but it's also a memoir. But I'm kind of like talking myself into a hole here. But the little word under the title usually says a memoir. And so I think that's what I'm talking about is when there's a title and then a
Yeah.
memoir because that like captures a certain portion of their life. Usually it's quite a big portion of their life, but there's a style of writing that is memoir writing. So let's say if I write a book of essays,
Yeah.
it's memoir like because I'm just talking about my own life and my
Yeah.
reflections. So that's memoir-esque, but I'm talking about like Wild, a memoir by Cheryl Strayed, and it is very specific. It's her journey after she lost her mom to cancer and she went off the deep end and then she decided to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. And then it ends. Like it's not her entire life, but it's about her hiking the Pacific Crest Trail as she's grieving the death of her mother.
The guy who does Founders podcast, he already reads business biographies, and so he's just starting a podcast out of it. So, you want to start the podcast on top of your life, so that's not really hard. Because if you're already reading, let's say, memoirs of, certain kind of people and all that, it's easy to just do the podcast rather than now you're like, oh yeah, I have to read a memoir because I have a podcast. No, it's more like I read a memoir and I have a podcast, so I should just talk about it. Wow.
Mhm.
I'm curious, just as a final question to round up the episode, what's the next phase for the podcast? You starting a new one? Are you growing days?
Um, I'm wrapping up season 4 in May. And so I've already recorded most of all the episodes. I have a really great foster dad coming on the show soon. I recorded with him. His name is Peter. He actually grew up in Uganda and kind of had a volatile relationship with his dad, and so he lived at a train station in downtown Kampala, I think, for several years as a homeless teenager with a group of friends, a group of other teenage boys. Um, and then someone kind of reached out and helped him get some education. And then he moved to the States, got some education, and then became a foster dad. So he has several kids. He lives in the same state as I do. And I got to interview him for 2 episodes. We got enough content for 2 episodes. So I'm super excited to have him. And I have a couple episodes that I recorded like 6 months ago that I just have not edited and posted yet. So I am working on those. I have all the content probably to go through May, and then I take a summer break. And then I think really in season 5, in the fall when I kick off, I try to sprinkle in some single episodes of me just talking about certain books that I really think will help foster and adoptive families, mixed in with some interviews with authors. But I think even after this conversation, it further cements the idea that I really do need to be putting my audience first and my listener. And I can't just talk about whatever I want to talk about just because I want to talk about it. It really has to be something that will serve them well. And I also want to bring in more humor and lightness because it just makes the experience so much better for the listener when there's just a little
Yeah.
bit of lightness. I can't just talk about a hard book and focus on the hard nitty gritty all the time. I really want to kind of infuse a little bit more joy and hope and gratitude and humor. And so I want to make sure I choose the right guests and the right books that will just allow me to just make things a little bit more fun.
From the conversation I've had with you, it's obvious that I think the audience is bigger than the format. So what I mean is that like Founders Podcast, even though the guy does book reviews, it's not like his podcast is not book reviews. His podcast is founders, right? So it's a podcast for founders. And same thing in your own case. Your podcast is for foster parents and adoptive parents, right? And so you just use book as the format, and that could change or that could not change. But I think the title and the name of your podcast should reveal that, because even though your podcast is about book reviews, it's not just a podcast for anyone. It's not like if I listen to it, something's going to happen to me. But that podcast wasn't made for me, right? It's like when you see someone eating a dog food, even though in most of the case, not is going to happen to them, but that food was made for dogs, not for human, right? Or you give a dog food to a cat food. I don't want to use dog and human, so it doesn't sound like I'm compare your podcast. That's not what I mean. I mean, when you give a dog food to a cat food, right? Right? When you give a dog food to a cat, right? The food wasn't made for the cat, but sometimes the cat can eat it and still not have any issues, right? You get so yeah, that's a terrible example, but yeah,
It's awesome. I mean, I think
yeah,
about like the circle of like you have your target listener or your target
yeah,
reader. So I am
yeah,
making a podcast for cats who eat dog food. And then the
yeah.
circle grows where you are reaching cats who eat cat food. And then the circle grows where you are
That's
reaching.
about cat. Not the food, right? And so I'm just saying that when the people say the title, they should be able to tell, right? So book therapy is a great title. It's awesome, but if I'm a foster parent, I don't. That doesn't really tell me if this podcast is for me. I mean, except I love to read books, which so yeah. But it's a great idea. It's a great concept. I love what you're doing with the show, and of course, as you keep doing it, more ideas will keep coming up. And I would love to circle back in the future and see what you've done with the podcast or the podcasts. And thank you so much for having this conversation with me and for just chatting with me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Wisdom. And thank you for bringing some fresh insights to the
Oh
podcast
wow,
journey because
yeah, I'll
you made
send you
me
the
think
invoice.
about things that okay. Well, when I'm a creative writing teacher one day, I'll be like, I had this really great conversation way back in 20 years ago about how the target audience, we need to write a certain book for each certain people. And I'm finally going to do that idea that I thought about 20 years ago on that podcast. Here we go.
Oh, okay. Where can listeners listen to your podcast and also connect with you?
So my website is easy, kimpatton.com, and you can kind of
Wait,
find
wait. What's the website? I feel like you said so many things. Like And I'm sure that some of the things you said doesn't flow with the website. What's the website?
www.kimpatton.com.
Okay.
Got it?
So you got that.
Yes.
Patton.com. I'll put the link in the description so listeners can just click and go directly to the site. When you said my website is easy, I was like, is easy part of it or is it something different? It's been a
Oh,
pleasure chatting with you, Kim.
yeah, I didn't think about that. I need to be careful now that people are going to be like www.easykimpatton.com. No, that's not my website.
That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story because someone out there needs to hear it.